Question number 9, Jacinda Ardern.
My question's for the Minister of Social Development and asks, if reducing child poverty is a priority for her government, why has the number of children living in poverty based on the Household Incomes Report increased from 260,000 in 2013 to 305,000 in 2014?
And again, as I call the Minister, I've been advised this answer will be longer than normal. The Honourable Anne Tolley.
Mr Speaker, the member is misrepresenting the Household Incomes Report, which uses multiple measures of poverty and hardship. I refer the member to page 131 on the Household Incomes Report, which states that making the sorts of claim that the member has just made in her question is not correct and, quote, is misleadingly matter of fact, end quote, and, quote, breaches the report's multi-level approach to monitoring. For the benefit of the member, the Household Incomes Reports show that the median household income increased significantly last year, while the earnings of those on the lowest incomes have remained stable. That has increased the number of children living in households with incomes of less than 60% of the median income after housing costs, despite their incomes remaining the same. Using that member's logic of relying on a single measure, we would have reduced child poverty if the median income had fallen. Well, this is obviously nonsensical and shows the importance of using a number of measures to assess long-term trends in poverty and hardship.
Supplementary question, Jacinda Ardern.
Is child poverty too high in New Zealand?
The Honourable Anne Tolley.
Mr Speaker, as I've just outlined in my answer to the primary question, that it is very difficult to use one measure to determine poverty and hardship. However, this government is determined to address the most severe hardship for our children, which is why in Budget 15 we increased the benefit rate by $25 a week for the first time in 43 years, and we increased family working for families for those low-income working families. Again, huge measures put in place to address the hardship that the lowest income families in New Zealand have.
Point of order, Jacinda Ardern.
Point of order. Mr Speaker, I deliberately asked a very short question. Is child poverty too high in New Zealand? That was off the back of the Minister's first answer, which I listened to. I asked for her determination. She did not give me an answer to that question.
Order. And in fact, 3 of her colleagues interjected through the answer it yes or no. I refer the member to Speaker's Ruling 1874. You cannot demand a yes or no answer, no matter how clear the question is. Order. I'm still ruling. On this occasion, the best way I suggest forward is I will give an additional supplementary to the member, Jacinda Ardern. Supplementary question, Jacinda Ardern.
Supplementary to the Minister. Is child poverty too high in New Zealand?
The Honourable Anne Tolley.
Mr Speaker, I am unable to answer that question. As the Household Incomes Report points out, there is no way on one measure to actually answer that question. I refer the member to Annex to Section 8, which brings together all the measures relating to low income and material hardship findings for children, which draws on both the Incomes Report and the companion report that goes with it. And that is what we should be using to determine severe hardship and hardship in New Zealand families.
Supplementary question, Jacinda Ardern.
Supplementary to the Minister. If child poverty is a priority, will she use Social Justice Week to set targets to reduce it like the UK has done? If not, why not?
The Honourable Ann Tolley.
Well, Mr Speaker, as I said again in a previous answer, this government is determined to address severe hardship for New Zealand families. That is why in Budget 2015 we brought in a package worth $790 million addressed at those families receiving the very lowest incomes. That is about actions that we take, not having special weeks to recognise it.
Mr Speaker.
A point of order, Jacinda Ardern.
I asked the Minister specifically about whether or not she would set targets. No. I still didn't feel like that question was addressed.
No. Well, the member asked about, also referred to if child poverty is a priority for the government, and without a doubt in my mind the question was addressed on this occasion. Supplementary question, Jacinda Ardern.
Supplementary to the Minister. Why has the Minister set targets to reduce child abuse but will not set targets to reduce child poverty?
The Honourable Ann Tolley.
Well, it's an excellent question, actually, and the answer to the member is it is very easy to measure the number of assaults on children. That is a very easy thing to measure. However, as the report points out, and again I direct the member's attention to Annex to Section 8, in the report that she's quoting from in the primary question, which brings together a range of measures that is needed to give a true picture of what is happening in those low-income New Zealand families.
Supplementary question, Jacinda Ardern.
Supplementary to the Minister. Which element of Labor's child poverty bill, which sets 5 targets for reducing child poverty across 5 measures, does she disagree with? If she can't name them, will she support the bill?
Either of those two supplementary questions. The Honourable Ann Tolley.
Mr Speaker, I don't have the bill in front of me.
Question number 10.